So at this point, you and your group partner have hopefully together written and submitted your proposal. So you went through a process that the two of you sort of improvised on assigning tasks, sharing your work with each other, providing feedback on your work and revising that work, holding each other accountable to the dates that you set for one another and the tasks that you agreed to work on. You've met and talked, whether that's over Zoom or the phone or some other platform, and you've exchanged some sort of written correspondences, whether that's through email, text message, Slack posts, or other platforms. And I do suggest you look at Slack as a possible workspace. It's much better than email and it's better than texting because you can share documents, and it's very clear to go through, what the other person has posted and said and how you've responded, and keeps everything pretty organized. So I'm curious what you think about how that process went for the proposal. So you can spend a minute now thinking about these questions and then come back and actually jot down some answers to these. So the process you just went through for writing the proposal, what worked well for the writing, researching, and revising process? And then why did each of those work? What did not work well in the writing, researching, and revising process for the proposal assignment? And why didn't each of those work? So hopefully you've gotten just a few ideas that have popped into your head. Jot those down and then come back and answer all four of these question boxes. So what I'd like to do now is give you some ideas for how to delegate tasks and keep each other um, responsible and accountable for your group work going forward. So the first scenario here is that everyone in the group has about the same writing and researching skill levels. So it's not that one of you necessarily says, oh, I can handle this because I'm really good at it. Or the other one says, hey, I'd like to practice this, so let me take this part on. But you all feel pretty equal in your abilities and interests. So what I suggest, which is what you probably have already done, is that you break up the research and writing task equally for the next assignment. But make sure that everyone seems to be contributing the same amount of work. And if they aren't, I think that that should be acknowledged, right? So either state it aloud and follow up by making a note that the next time that other person is going to need to make up for not taking on as much work, or write it somewhere and again, make a note about the next assignment. So that way it doesn't just sort of get ignored and then you end up feeling like you're doing more than the other person. I also think that you should make a schedule, which I know some of you have already done, for how you're going to meet the Thursday night due dates for these assignments. So something that I think some of you have already done is schedule for the end of the day on Monday that everybody has their contributions done. And then everyone needs to post their work in a shared Google Doc or on a shared Google Drive. And then you want to schedule a time for Tuesday by which everyone has to have read their peers' work that they submitted Monday and must type some sort of comments with responses to their peers' work. So even if it's just to acknowledge, like, I think this works, or this should, go in the second paragraph, or if it's actual edits and comments about how to revise or make it stronger, but you really want to take the work seriously and comment on one another so that you show that you've read and processed what the other person has contributed so far. And then if needed, you can make a group appointment with me during my office hours on Tuesday. And then you want to set a date that everyone has made revisions by Wednesday or Thursday morning. And then review and revise each other's work so that you're compiling it all into one document, and making sure that it flows, fix any errors, download it, and then give yourself more than enough time to review it and submit by 11 p.m. And if needed, you can book an appointment with me during my office hours on Thursday. So maybe there's one group member in this scenario whose writing skills are not their strongest skill, and they've acknowledged that. So then one way that you might want to set up the work is that the member who has weaker writing skills um, does the first take at actually writing a detailed outline and or draft of the assignment. So it might seem counterintuitive, but if their writing skills aren't as strong, then they need to contribute somehow into the writing because they need to practice their writing skills. So rather than having them sit out and not do any writing, have them do the first take, which is always going to need revision anyway, right? So have them do either a detailed outline, not something that's just very skeletal that doesn't really help or contribute. And then when they're done, plenty of days ahead of when the assignment is actually due, the other member who has somewhat stronger writing skills goes in and revises what the other member wrote. And then don't just submit and move on, but have a final conversation about the document. That way, the peer who started can understand the changes that were made and why they were made so that they're learning how to build and develop their writing skills. The opposite is that there's a group member who has more content knowledge, whereas another group member has stronger writing skills. Right? So someone who understands the concept of the game or understands the concept of how to put together the game, and so feels better equipped writing about the research or whatever it may be content-wise. And then the other group member says, well, I have somewhat of an understanding, but it was your idea, but I know I can really help with the writing part of it. So in that sense, you're actually going to do the opposite. So the member who has more content knowledge is going to do the first take at writing the document. Then the member who has the stronger writing skills revises it. And then the original drafter, the one with more content knowledge, goes back in and ensures that any revision and changes that were made didn't alter the correct meaning of the text. So none of that content accuracy is not, so that it's not lost. And then again, you want to have a final conversation about the document before submitting so that everybody understands what changes were made and why. And then there's definitely the possibility that a group member has trouble accepting feedback or sticking to deadlines. So what do you do then? Well, the member may have a different communication style than you, which can lead to conflict. I think the best way to approach this at first is to acknowledge and support your peers' time and efforts, whether it's with family issues, work that they're doing, other courses, or whatever the time and effort they've contributed to the project. And then don't offer solutions. First, lay out to make sure that everybody understands what problems are occurring and why those problems are occurring. And then allow your peer to speak freely about their time and their efforts. So what is it that they feel like they're doing? What is it that they wish they were doing? Why aren't they able to meet the deadlines or do their tasks completely? Maybe they're having difficulty finding the research and they need, to spend more time focusing on how to research. And then allow your peer to offer their own solutions, right? And their solutions might be different than what you originally thought was going to be your task and schedule. But try it, right? So change up the group work so that you can try to meet your peers' solutions and see if that works better. And then just in general, if there are any difficulties, conflicts, or problems that may arise, schedule a time to work together rather than separately. It used to be that you could all meet before class and spend an hour working in the castle lobby to make sure that you're all getting some work done. But in this case now, why not just schedule a time to meet on Zoom? And you're both in the Zoom space together, but you're not actually working on the same tasks. So you're working on your individual tasks separately, but you're sitting in that Zoom space together for a set amount of time. And that way, if any questions arise, at least you're there to ask and answer, and you're also holding each other accountable, which is helpful. And then before you leave that working space, decide together what the next steps are going to be and schedule a due date for each other's next steps. And you can do a similar process if you make a synchronous appointment with the Writing Center. So you can meet with a consultant at the Writing Center as an entire group. You can meet individually. And that also gives you an hour to make sure that you're spending that time on the project. because sometimes it can be really hard to find the motivation to schedule time to work. So some best practices for writing collaboratively mean that you should be building revision due dates and times into the task schedule and feedback due dates and times into the task schedule. So make sure that all of those expected dates and times are set ahead of delegating tasks. And then decide together on a revision process and make sure that you're following it. Use writing software such as Google Docs that keeps a history of revisions, and decide with your group members the structure and process of how you're going to show each other work. And then make sure that you're giving enough time to your peer to edit and revise and then discuss with you before you submit the final assignment. So problems are always going to arise when you're working with a group member. It's not something that you can necessarily avoid. So just make sure that you're acknowledging the concerns and that you're working together to try to fix it rather than just ignore it. For week 10, it's not published yet, but there's an additional 5-point assignment to watch this video and submit responses to 4 questions about how your group work is going so far. So you'll watch the video, post your answers to these 4, and your peer is going to be able to see your responses. So you want to make sure that you're handling this professionally, but also honestly. Don't sugarcoat what you need to say, but also don't be accusatory or rude. You have to work with each other for the next few weeks, and maybe it's going well so far, maybe it's not going as well as you thought, but you need to figure out a way to make it a positive experience. So you'll submit that, you'll be able to read each other's work, and then as always, this is optional, you don't need to do this, contact me to set up an appointment outside of my office hours if those times don't work for you and your group, or make the appointment yourselves. You can meet with me as a group or individually, or send me an email.